The morning sky above New York was a soft shade of gold, the horizon just beginning to glow with the first rays of sunlight. John F. Kennedy International Airport buzzed with the usual mix of hurried footsteps, rolling suitcases, and distant announcements calling passengers to their gates. For most travelers, this was just another Monday morning. Business people clutched laptops, parents juggled restless children, and tourists carried maps folded awkwardly in their hands. To them, Flight 247 bound for Los Angeles was simply a way to get across the country. But for Officer Michael Daniels, this flight was more than routine. Daniels, a seasoned air marshal in his early 40s, blended in like any other tired commuter. He wore a casual jacket, dark jeans, and a cap pulled low, concealing the sharp, watchful eyes of a man who had seen far too much. His calm exterior gave nothing away, yet underneath it was a constant readiness, a heightened awareness honed through years of experience. Out of his side walked Rex, a large German shepherd with a sleek coat and steady gait. Officially, Rex was disguised as a service dog, his vest marked plainly so passengers wouldn't think twice. Unofficially, he was one of the most highly trained canine units in the federal force, a dog who could sniff out explosives, track hidden weapons, and take down armed attackers in seconds. The pair drew little attention as they approached the boarding gate. Some passengers smiled at Rex in passing, children whispering excitedly at the sight of the big dog. Daniels gave a polite nod, offering no explanation. No one needed to know that. Rex wasn't here to guide a blind man or comfort an anxious traveler. He was here because threats like hijackings, though rare, were real, and Daniels knew better than most how quickly a plane could go from safe to deadly. When boarding began, Daniels and Rex moved with the crowd. He carried only a small carry-on, carefully concealing his firearm and credentials in a way that would never raise suspicion. His job, after all, depended on being invisible until the moment he had to act. Inside the cabin, the familiar smell of recycled air, fabric seats, and faintly brewed coffee filled the space. Flight attendants greeted passengers with practiced smiles as they directed them to their rows. Daniels settled near the middle of the plane, an ideal vantage point to observe without being trapped in either direction. Rex curled at his feet, lying down obediently but keeping his head raised, eyes scanning the movement in the aisle, as if cataloging every face. Around him, the flight unfolded like any other. A young couple across the aisle tried to quiet their toddler, who clutched a toy airplane and made zooming noises far louder than his parents preferred. 2 rows ahead, a businesswoman opened her laptop immediately, fingers flying over the keyboard as though the entire cross-country flight was nothing more than a long office session in the sky. Behind Daniels, a group of college students laughed too loudly, joking about their upcoming trip to California beaches. And near the front, a soldier in uniform leaned back with closed eyes, finally letting himself rest after what looked like weeks away from home. But it was ordinary, comforting, almost boring. But Daniels knew better than to let comfort dull his senses. His eyes shifted subtly across the cabin, noting details. Who carried what bags? Who avoided eye contact? Who seemed more nervous than necessary? Years of instinct guided him, the quiet voice in his head that had saved his life more than once. Beside him, Rex shifted suddenly, ears twitching. The shepherd's nose quivered, his chest rising as he drew in the air, then gave a faint, low growl that only Daniels could hear. It wasn't loud enough to alarm nearby passengers, but Daniels caught it immediately. He bent slightly, resting his hand on Rex's back, whispering in a voice so soft only the dog could hear. "Easy, boy." "Not yet," Rex quieted, but his amber eyes never left the aisle. Daniels leaned back casually in his seat, trying not to draw attention. To anyone else, he looked like a man traveling with his loyal dog. But his pulse had quickened slightly. He trusted Rex more than anyone, If the dog sensed something off, it wasn't paranoia. It was instinct, sharpened to a razor edge. A flight attendant walked by, offering drinks as the plane taxied down the runway. Daniels accepted a cup of coffee with a smile, his demeanor calm, but his thoughts raced. He studied the passengers again, carefully. Nothing obvious stood out, at least not yet. But the unease in Rex's growl lingered in his mind like a warning bell. Minutes later, the plane roared down the runway, engines thundering as it lifted into the sky. Passengers relaxed into their seats, some opening books, others adjusting earbuds. A baby cried briefly before its mother lulled it back to sleep. The captain's voice came over the intercom, warm and practiced, welcoming everyone aboard Flight 247, and assuring them of smooth skies ahead. But Daniels didn't hear reassurance in the words. He heard vulnerability. Thousands of feet above the ground, sealed in a flying steel tube, everyone on board was entirely dependent on the crew, the technology, and in ways they didn't realize on him and Rex Dot as the plane leveled into its cruising altitude. Rex's head turned sharply toward the back of the cabin. His ears locked forward, muscles taut. Daniels followed the gaze discreetly. 3 men sat separately, scattered across rows, but their connection was clear to a trained observer. One glanced toward the aisle more often than necessary. Another clutched a bag far too tightly, and the third whispered something quickly before averting his eyes. Daniel's stomach tightened. He had seen this kind of coordination before. It was subtle, calculated, but it was there. He reached down, scratching Rex behind the ears, as though casually comforting his dog. In reality, it was a signal: stay sharp, stay ready. Rex's tail flicked once, the only acknowledgement needed. The rest of the passengers remained blissfully unaware, smiling at movies on their screens, sipping sodas, and flipping through magazines. For them, Flight 247 was just a long stretch of hours between two coasts. For Daniels and Rex, it was becoming something else entirely. The plane cruised smoothly through the brightening sky, engines humming steadily. Yet inside the cabin, beneath the laughter, the small talk, and the ordinary routines of flight, danger was brewing. Daniels felt it in his bones. Rex sensed it in his very blood, and neither of them knew just how soon their instincts would prove right. The plane hummed steadily, cruising at 30,000 feet, but inside the cabin, Michael Daniels could not shake the tightening knot in his stomach. His coffee had gone cold, untouched on the tray table. He wasn't thirsty anymore. He was watchful. Years of experience told him that peace was fragile, and Rex's subtle growl earlier was not something to ignore. Daniels let his gaze travel across the rows again, deliberately slow, as though he were a man bored with staring at the seat in front of him. His eyes flicked to the left, then to the right, catching fragments of movement. A mother passed a coloring book to her son. A teenager adjusted his headphones. The soldier in uniform stirred, half asleep. Everything ordinary. Everything safe, at least on the surface. But then his gaze landed on the 3 men he had noticed before. The first sat in the aisle seat, 2 rows ahead. He was tall, wiry, with sharp cheekbones and restless eyes. He wore a faded jacket that looked slightly too heavy for a cabin already warm with body heat. His hand drummed against his thigh, not nervously, but in a pattern, almost like a signal. Occasionally, his gaze darted toward the cockpit, then quickly away again. The second man was seated near the rear of the cabin, by the window. He had a neatly trimmed beard and clutched a black backpack with both hands, as though it contained his very soul. Even when the flight attendant politely reminded passengers to stow carry-ons under the seat or overhead, he refused to let go, muttering that it contained fragile items. His knuckles were white around the straps. The third man, near the chute, opposite aisle, leaned forward frequently, whispering toward the first, though his words were too low to catch. When the tall man gave a slight nod, He leaned back, pretending to flip through an in-flight magazine, but his eyes never moved across the page. To most passengers, they were invisible, just three strangers on a long flight. But Daniels saw the threads connecting them. The way they avoided looking at one another too much, yet mirrored each other's movements. The way tension radiated off them, unspoken but thick in the air. And then there was Rex. The shepherd's head rested low on his paws, but his eyes tracked every flicker of movement. His nostrils flared as if drawing in the scent of unease. Twice he gave a quiet, vibrating growl, so soft that only Daniels could feel it through the floor. Daniels stroked the dog's ear, pretending it was affection, but it was really a silent reassurance. "I see it too, boy. I see it." He replayed training scenarios in his head. Hijacking attempts, hostage drills, explosive threats. He measured distances, the aisle width, the gap between him and the cockpit, the number of passengers between him and each suspicious man. He counted potential weapons within reach: a tray, a coffee pot, the metal buckle of his belt. 100 possibilities spun in his mind, but still, he waited. Action too soon could expose him, but action too late could cost lives. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've reached cruising altitude. We expect a smooth ride, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight." Passengers clapped softly. A few even cheered. The soldier gave a sleepy grin and closed his eyes again. For them, it was routine. For Daniels, the words meant little. Smooth air didn't matter if turbulence was already brewing inside the cabin. The tall man unzipped his jacket just slightly, and Daniels' trained eye caught the glint of something metallic beneath the fabric. A knife? A piece of a weapon? He didn't stare long enough to confirm. He couldn't risk drawing attention. He just filed it away. The man with the backpack shifted again, placing it on his lap this time. Rex's head lifted, ears pricking, eyes narrowing. The shepherd's growl returned, low and steady, and this time Daniels pressed firmly against his collar to quiet him. "Not yet," he whispered, voice barely audible. The dog stilled, though his chest continued to rumble faintly. A flight attendant approached, her smile bright as she leaned toward the backpack man. "Sir, for safety reasons, I really must ask you to store your bag under the seat, or in the overhead bin." The man's reaction was immediate, too immediate. His eyes flashed, his grip tightening. "No, it stays here." His voice was low, edged with steel, though he forced a smile a second later. "It's very delicate. I can't risk damage." The attendant hesitated, sensing something off, but she wasn't trained for this. She nodded awkwardly, stepping back, choosing not to press the matter further. Daniels noted every detail. The tone, the reflexive anger, the way the other two men's heads turned ever so slightly at the sound. They were connected. No doubt now. Daniels breathed slowly, forcing calm into his body. He had been in dangerous situations, before gunfights, bomb threats, standoffs, but there was something uniquely suffocating about being trapped inside a metal tube thousands of feet above the ground. Here, every move mattered twice as much. Here, there was no escape. Rex shifted again, pressing his body against Daniels' leg, eyes locked on the backpack. Daniels reached down, scratching his fur, a signal of patience. "Wait. Watch." The ordinary hum of the flight continued. A child laughed at a cartoon on his tablet. A couple clinked plastic cups of soda. The businesswoman sighed as she lost internet connection, muttering under her breath. Life, in all its normality, carried on. And yet beneath it, the current of danger ran stronger, invisible to all but Daniels and his partner. The soldier stirred again, yawning, glancing briefly at the men before settling back. For a second, Daniels considered discreetly signaling him. Another set of hands could change the odds. But no, not yet. Timing was everything, and Daniels needed more than suspicion. He needed certainty. The tall man stood abruptly, stretching his arms, pretending to yawn. His eyes scanned the cabin quickly before he strolled casually toward the lavatory. Daniels watched his movements carefully, noting how his jacket bulged unnaturally near the waistline. Definitely something there. As he passed, Rex's ears twitched again, nose lifting. A faint whine escaped him, almost imperceptible, but Daniels heard it. He rubbed the dog's neck firmly. "Easy," he whispered again. The tall man disappeared into the lavatory. The backpack man leaned slightly, whispering something toward the third man. The whisper was short, clipped, and though Daniels couldn't make out the words, the tone was urgent. The third man gave the barest nod, his hand brushing his waistband briefly. Daniels' pulse quickened. This wasn't just paranoia anymore. This was the beginning of a plan unfolding. The flight attendant returned with a tray of drinks, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She smiled at the passengers, her cheerfulness genuine, unaware that danger sat only feet away. Daniels wanted to warn her, to say something, but he held back. A wrong word could trigger them too soon. He leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. His hand brushed Rex's collar, feeling the steady tension in the dog's muscles. Rex wasn't just a pet. He was a weapon, a partner, and more than once in the past, he had saved Daniel's life. Now, they would rely on each other again. The tall man returned from the lavatory, his jacket slightly unzipped, his eyes sharper, more focused. He glanced briefly at the cockpit door, then at his companions. The smallest flicker of a signal passed between them. Daniels saw it. Rex felt it. The countdown had begun. And though the passengers around them still laughed, sipped drinks, and scrolled through their phones, Daniels knew with chilling certainty that Flight 247 was about to become anything but ordinary. The hours slipped by quietly. Flight 247 droned steadily westward, engines roaring like a distant lullaby. To the ordinary traveler, nothing seemed amiss. Some passengers dozed. Others watched movies, while children colored pictures on the flimsy airline napkins. It was the calmest kind of monotony, the sort of atmosphere where danger feels like a myth. But to Michael Daniels and Rex, calm was only the mask before the storm. The three men had been too deliberate, too synchronized. Daniels could feel it like static in the air, prickling against his skin. Rex sensed it too every so often. The shepherd's head would snap up, ears stiff, his eyes locked on one of them. Daniels forced himself to appear relaxed, his posture slouched, his gaze casually set on a crossword puzzle he wasn't filling out. But beneath that facade, his mind was running at full speed. He rehearsed every possible outcome, every tactic. If they moved on the cockpit, what was his path forward? If they tried to intimidate passengers first, where could he use Rex most effectively? He was ready for 100 scenarios, but he knew the real one would still catch him off guard. Then it happened. It began with the tall man in the faded jacket. He rose too quickly from his seat, his hand darting inside his coat. A woman nearby let out a startled gasp when she saw the gleam of metal. It wasn't a phone. It wasn't a wallet. It was a gun. The cabin erupted in screams before the man even spoke. "Everyone down." He barked, his accent sharp, his voice booming across the rows. "Down now, or people die." Chaos broke instantly. Passengers ducked, hands over their heads, some crying, others frozen in shock. Children shrieked. Mothers clutched them tight. The soldier jolted awake, instinctively half rising before a second man, the one with the backpack, snapped open his coat, revealing a crude explosive vest strapped to his chest. The sight silenced everyone. Gasps turned to a suffocating stillness as the weight of that vest pressed over the entire cabin. "Sit down." The second man roared, his hand gripping the detonator trigger. "You move, we all die." The soldier sat back down slowly, his jaw clenched tight, fury burning in his eyes. But even he knew there was nothing he could do against an explosive at arm's reach. The third man, who had been seated near the middle, stood up as well, brandishing a knife he had somehow smuggled on board. He slashed it through the air, pointing at the terrified flight attendants. "Lock the doors. No one in or out of the cockpit until we say." Daniel's heart hammered, though his face remained composed. This was it. The hijacking had begun. He leaned slightly toward Rex, who was already up on his paws, muscles taut, teeth barely bared in silence. The dog's body trembled with restrained energy, a predator waiting for its master's signal. Daniels gave a tiny shake of his head. Not yet. They couldn't blow their cover too soon. The tall man marched down the aisle, his pistol sweeping across the rows. "Hands up. Everyone where I can see you." His voice cracked like a whip, shattering whatever fragments of calm remained. The flight attendants tried to intervene, their voices shaky but brave. "Please, please, don't hurt anyone. Let's talk. Shut up." The man snarled, shoving one of them hard against a seat. Her tray of drinks crashed to the floor, soda spilling across the aisle like a spreading wound. She whimpered, but she kept her eyes forward, refusing to cry. The backpack man moved closer to the front, shouting toward the cockpit. "Captain, open the door, or we blow this plane apart." The intercom crackled briefly. The captain's steady voice came through, tight with tension. "Please, remain calm. We can talk this through, now." The terrorist bellowed, yanking at the detonator trigger to prove his point. Several passengers sobbed openly. Daniel's mind worked furiously. Air marshals were trained for exactly this nightmare, but theory was nothing compared to the real thing. He had one firearm hidden on him, but drawing it now with so many civilians between him and the gunman was suicide. One stray bullet, one twitch of that detonator, and everyone would die. He glanced at Rex. The dog's eyes blazed, unblinking, locked on the backpack man with the vest. If Rex launched now, he could bring one of them down before the trigger was pulled. But if Daniels misjudged if that vest was real, it wouldn't matter how brave Rex was. The plane would be nothing more than a falling fireball dot, so he waited. And waiting was agony. The third man with the knife began moving down the rows, forcing passengers to raise their hands. He slashed the blade dangerously close to their faces, enjoying their flinches of terror. When he reached a young boy clutching a teddy bear, he jabbed the knife against the bear's throat, smirking cruelly. The boy's mother screamed, clutching her child tighter. That was when Rex growled louder, no longer able to contain himself. The sound rolled low and deep through the cabin, the unmistakable sound of a predator ready to strike. The man with the knife spun, glaring. "Shut that dog up," he shouted, pointing the blade toward Daniels. Dozens of heads turned instantly, the passengers' wide eyes landing on Daniels and his German shepherd. The spotlight was on them now. His cover was dangerously close to blown. Daniels raised his hand slowly, pretending fear, keeping his expression neutral. "He's just a service dog," he said calmly, his voice steady. "He won't hurt anyone. I'll keep him quiet." The man sneered, but backed away slightly, still wary of the animal's teeth. Rex didn't stop growling, though Daniels pressed a firm hand against his chest. His partner's instincts were screaming louder than ever. This was the moment. This was danger. But Daniels whispered under his breath, just loud enough for the dog alone. "Not yet, boy. Not yet." The tall man with the gun barked new orders. "Tie them. Everyone gets tied." From his pocket, he tossed out a handful of plastic zip ties. The knife-wielding man grabbed them, forcing passengers to bind one another's wrists. The fear was suffocating, passengers fumbling clumsily, hands shaking so badly they could barely loop the ties. Daniels offered his wrists when it was his turn, making sure the ties looked tight, but leaving enough slack for him to slip free later. The man didn't notice, too focused on moving down the line. The cabin was falling into submission. The terrorists were in control, and the passengers were too terrified to resist. Every second tightened their grip, cementing the hijackers' dominance. Daniel's mind raced. He had to find the crack, the moment when fear could turn back into courage. But for now, he stayed silent, calculating. Rex's growls hadn't stopped. The shepherd's amber eyes flicked between the gun, the vest, the knife. To the passengers, Rex was just a loyal service animal reacting to chaos. But to Daniels, he was the edge of the blade they hadn't seen, yet the weapon hidden in plain sight. The balance hadn't shifted yet. But Daniels could feel it building. Every insult, every shove, every cruel laugh from the hijackers was drawing the line tighter. Something was going to snap dot, and when it did, Daniels and Rex would be ready. The cabin of Flight 247 had grown unbearably tense. Every passenger sat frozen, eyes wide, hands tied, breaths shallow. The faint hum of the engines barely masked the drum of fear that pounded like a second heartbeat in the metal tube hurtling across the sky. Time seemed to stretch, every second heavier than the last. Daniel's eyes swept over the passengers. Mothers clutched their children, husbands shielded wives, and soldiers stared at the floor, muscles coiled, ready to act but trapped. Panic and despair had taken root, thick and suffocating. Rex, lying at Daniel's feet, sensed the growing volatility. His ears flicked constantly, nostrils flaring as he picked up subtle cues no human could detect. The dog's growl had grown louder, more insistent, vibrating through his chest, but Daniels kept him restrained with a firm hand. "Not yet," he whispered, voice trembling only slightly. "Wait." Then it happened. A small voice, high-pitched, terrified, breaking through the cabin screen. "Mama! Help me!" Daniel's head snapped toward the sound. A little girl, no older than 7, struggled against the knife-wielding hijacker. She had been trying to hide, pressed against her mother's side, but her sobs had betrayed her. The man's knife hovered dangerously close to her shoulder. He jabbed at the teddy bear she clutched, as if punishing her courage. Her mother screamed, clutching her tightly, rocking her back and forth, tears streaming down her face. "Please, don't hurt her. She's just a child." The cabin fell into a stunned silence, everyone frozen in horror. Even the hardened air marshals and soldiers felt the icy grip of helplessness. Rex's growl escalated to a low, guttural roar. His body tensed, back legs coiled like springs, tail stiff. He growled directly at the knife-wielding hijacker, teeth bared, ears forward. Every instinct screamed that a life was in danger. Daniels pressed a hand firmly on the dog's chest, trying to force calm, but the canine could not be restrained for long. His eyes were locked on the man threatening the child. Muscle, sinew, and training screamed for action. Daniels whispered again, softer, almost pleading. "Hold. Wait for my signal." But the dog's patience was at its limit. His amber eyes flashed with urgency, his lips curled back, exposing the sharp tips of his teeth. A single shift could mean life or death. The knife wielder sneered at Rex, mockingly waving the blade. "Big dog, huh? Maybe we cut his throat if he gets noisy." Daniel's jaw clenched. He forced a calm exterior, but inside, adrenaline surged. The man had no idea what he was provoking. Not just a loyal dog, but years of training, experience, and survival instinct packed into a deadly force. The little girl whimpered again, clutching her teddy bear closer. The hijacker jabbed the knife at the stuffed animal, laughing cruelly. Her cries ripped through the cabin, echoing in the hearts of every passenger. The soldier's hands itched. The businessman's jaw tightened, The mothers gripped their children harder, but no one could act. Not yet. The vest man's eyes were on the gun, the gunman's on the aisle. A single misstep could trigger catastrophe. Daniel's mind worked faster than thought. Timing was everything. If Rex acted now, it had to count. The K-9's launch had to neutralize the immediate threat before the other hijackers could react. He leaned slightly, whispering one last command, nearly inaudible. Now, Rex. The dog exploded forward like lightning unleashed. Chaos erupted. The knife-wielding hijacker barely had time to react before Rex lunged, claws and teeth striking him mid-thrust. The man screamed, tripping over a seat, knife clattering to the floor. Rex held him down with precise, trained pressure, ensuring the threat was neutralized without unnecessary injury. The cabin erupted into screams, passengers ducking, falling, and clutching one another in terror. Daniel sprang into action immediately, drawing his sidearm and securing the gun from the tall hijacker. His movements were swift, precise, and deliberate. His years of training came alive with every heartbeat. He tackled the gunman toward the floor, pressing him down, keeping the barrel away from everyone. Meanwhile, Rex kept the knife wielder pinned, growling low, never letting his jaws loosen. The little girl screamed in relief, the mother wrapping her arms around her child. Some passengers cried openly. Some just stared, frozen in disbelief at the sudden turn of events. The vest bearer, momentarily stunned by the sudden assault, glanced at his detonator, panic flashing across his face. For the first time, the hijackers were uncertain. The aura of control they had maintained for so long was gone. Daniels barked commands, voice steady and authoritative, cutting through the chaos. Stay down. Everyone stay down. Don't move. A soldier sprang from his seat, grabbing the vest bearer in a desperate tackle, trying to wrestle him away from the trigger. Another passenger helped restrain him with belts and scarves from nearby seats. The cabin, previously paralyzed by fear, began to fight back. Rex released the knife wielder only when Daniels gave the command, jaw snapping shut with precision. The man tried to struggle, but was quickly subdued by several passengers working together. The little girl clung to her mother, sobbing with relief. "Thank you, dog. Thank you," she cried, her voice filled with a child's pure, innocent gratitude. Daniels knelt beside Rex, scratching his ears, praising him quietly. "Good boy. That's my boy. You did amazing." Passengers were stunned into silence, processing the reality that a K-9 had just taken down a hijacker mid-flight, saving a child's life in the process. The heroism of one dog and the air marshal's quick thinking had shifted the entire balance of power. The tall gunman had been disarmed, the knife wielder subdued, and the vest bearer now restrained by passengers and soldiers. But Daniels knew better than to celebrate too soon. One mistake, one sudden movement, could still set off the bomb. He had to remain alert. He swept the cabin with his eyes again. Passengers, once paralyzed by fear, now looked at him, then at Rex, with a mixture of awe and hope. Their terror had begun to transform into courage. Rex, sensing the shift, calmed slightly but stayed alert, head low and eyes unblinking. Daniels whispered again, "We're not done yet. Stay with me, boy." The little girl peeked through her mother's embrace. "Can we be safe now?" she asked softly. Daniels gave a small nod, though internally he knew the danger was far from over. "We're getting there," he said gently. For the first time since the hijacking began, the cabin felt different. There was fear, yes, but now there was hope. Courage had returned in fragments, coiled and ready to strike when the time came. The breaking point had passed. The first act of defiance had begun, and Michael Daniels knew, with every fiber of his being, that Rex's leap had changed everything. The hijackers had lost the element of complete control, and the passengers, inspired by the bravery of one man and one dog, were beginning to believe that survival and victory was possible. The plane was still in the air, 30,000 feet above ground, hurtling toward an uncertain destination. But inside, the tide was turning. The stage was set for the final confrontation. And Daniels, with Rex at his side, was ready to see it through. The cabin of Flight 247 had grown unbearably tense. Every passenger sat frozen, eyes wide, hands tied, breaths shallow. The faint hum of the engines barely masked the drum of fear that pounded like a second heartbeat in the metal tube hurtling across the sky. Time seemed to stretch, every second heavier than the last. Daniel's eyes swept over the passengers. Mothers clutched their children, husbands shielded wives, and soldiers stared at the floor, muscles coiled, ready to act but trapped. Panic and despair had taken root, thick and suffocating. Rex, lying at Daniel's feet, sensed the growing volatility. His ears flicked constantly, nostrils flaring as he picked up subtle cues no human could detect. The dog's growl had grown louder, more insistent, vibrating through his chest, but Daniels kept him restrained with a firm hand. "Not yet," he whispered, voice trembling only slightly. "Wait." Then it happened. A small voice, high-pitched, terrified, breaking through the cabin, screamed, "Mama! Help me!" Daniel's head snapped toward the sound. A little girl, no older than 7, struggled against the knife-wielding hijacker. She had been trying to hide, pressed against her mother's side, but her sobs had betrayed her. The man's knife hovered dangerously close to her shoulder. He jabbed at the teddy bear she clutched, as if punishing her courage. Her mother screamed, clutching her tightly, rocking her back and forth, tears streaming down her face. "Please, don't hurt her. She's just a child." The cabin fell into a stunned silence, everyone frozen in horror. Even the hardened air marshals and soldiers felt the icy grip of helplessness. Rex's growl escalated to a low, guttural roar. His body tensed, back legs coiled like springs, tail stiff. He growled directly at the knife-wielding hijacker, teeth bared, ears forward. Every instinct screamed that a life was in danger. Daniels pressed a hand firmly on the dog's chest, trying to force calm, but the canine could not be restrained for long. His eyes were locked on the man threatening the child. Muscle, sinew, and training screamed for action. Daniels whispered again, softer, almost pleading. "Hold. Wait for my signal." But the dog's patience was at its limit. His amber eyes flashed with urgency, his lips curled back, exposing the sharp tips of his teeth. A single shift could mean life or death. The knife wielder sneered at Rex, mockingly waving the blade. "Big dog, huh? Maybe we cut his throat if he gets noisy." Daniel's jaw clenched. He forced a calm exterior, but inside, adrenaline surged. The man had no idea what he was provoking. Not just a loyal dog, but years of training, experience, and survival instinct packed into a deadly force. The little girl whimpered again, clutching her teddy bear closer. The hijacker jabbed the knife at the stuffed animal, laughing cruelly. Her cries ripped through the cabin, echoing in the hearts of every passenger. The soldiers' hands itched. The businessman's jaw tightened. The mothers gripped their children harder, but no one could act. Not yet. The vest man's eyes were on the gun, the gunman's on the aisle. A single misstep could trigger catastrophe. Daniel's mind worked faster than thought. Timing was everything. If Rex acted now, it had to count. The K-9's launch had to neutralize the immediate threat before the other hijackers could react. He leaned slightly, whispering one last command, nearly inaudible. "Now, Rex." The dog exploded forward like lightning unleashed. Chaos erupted. The knife-wielding hijacker barely had time to react before Rex lunged, claws and teeth striking him mid-thrust. The man screamed, tripping over a seat, knife clattering to the floor. Rex held him down with precise, trained pressure, ensuring the threat was neutralized without unnecessary injury. The cabin erupted into screams, passengers, ducking, falling, and clutching one another in terror. Daniel sprang into action immediately, drawing his sidearm and securing the gun from the tall hijacker. His movements were swift, precise, and deliberate. His years of training came alive with every heartbeat. He tackled the gunman toward the floor, pressing him down, keeping the barrel away from everyone. Meanwhile, Rex kept the knife wielder pinned, growling low, never letting his jaws loosen. The little girl screamed in relief, the mother wrapping her arms around her child. Some passengers cried openly. Some just stared, frozen in disbelief at the sudden turn of events. The vest bearer, momentarily stunned by the sudden assault, glanced at his detonator, panic flashing across his face. For the first time, the hijackers were uncertain. The aura of control they had maintained for so long was gone. Daniels barked commands, voice steady and authoritative, cutting through the chaos. Stay down. Everyone stay down. Don't move. A soldier sprang from his seat, grabbing the vest bearer in a desperate tackle, trying to wrestle him away from the trigger. Another passenger helped restrain him with belts and scarves from nearby seats. The cabin, previously paralyzed by fear, began to fight back. Rex released the knife wielder only when Daniels gave the command, jaw snapping shut with precision. The man tried to struggle, but was quickly subdued by several passengers working together. The little girl clung to her mother, sobbing with relief. "Thank you, dog. Thank you," she cried, her voice filled with a child's pure, innocent gratitude. Daniels knelt beside Rex, scratching his ears, praising him quietly. "Good boy. That's my boy. You did amazing." Passengers were stunned into silence, processing the reality that a K-9 had just taken down a hijacker mid-flight, saving a child's life in the process. The heroism of one dog and the air marshal's quick thinking had shifted the entire balance of power. The tall gunman had been disarmed, the knife wielder subdued, and the vest bearer now restrained by passengers and soldiers. But Daniels knew better than to celebrate too soon. One mistake, one sudden movement, could still set off the bomb. He had to remain alert. He swept the cabin with his eyes again. Passengers, once paralyzed by fear, now looked at him, then at Rex, with a mixture of awe and hope. Their terror had begun to transform into courage. Rex, sensing the shift, calmed slightly, but stayed alert, head low and eyes unblinking. Daniels whispered again, "We're not done yet. Stay with me, boy." The little girl peeked through her mother's embrace. "Can we be safe now?" she asked softly. Daniels gave a small nod, though internally he knew the danger was far from over. "We're getting there," he said gently. For the first time since the hijacking began, the cabin felt different. There was fear, yes, but now there was hope. Courage had returned in fragments, coiled and ready to strike when the time came. The breaking point had passed. The first act of defiance had begun, and Michael Daniels knew, with every fiber of his being, that Rex's leap had changed everything. The hijackers had lost the element of complete control, and the passengers, inspired by the bravery of one man and one dog, were beginning to believe that survival and victory was possible. The plane was still in the air, 30,000 feet above ground, hurtling toward an uncertain destination. But inside, the tide was turning. The stage was set for the final confrontation. And Daniels, with Rex at his side, was ready to see it through. The cabin of Flight 247 erupted into chaos. But in that chaos, every move counted. The roar of the engines seemed distant now, swallowed by screams, shouts, and the rapid heartbeat of terror. Michael Daniels didn't hesitate. Years of training, preparation, and instinct condensed into a single, precise series of actions. Beside him, Rex lunged like a coiled spring, teeth bared, muscles rippling, eyes locked on the knife-wielding hijacker, threatening the little girl. The dog struck first, a blur of movement that sent the hijacker sprawling over seats. The knife clattered to the floor as Rex's jaws clamped around the man's shoulder, holding him down with exacting force. The man thrashed wildly, trying to free himself, but Rex's grip was perfect enough to incapacitate without causing permanent damage. Daniels immediately sprang into action. With the gunman disarmed moments earlier, he grabbed the loose pistol from the aisle floor, pressing it firmly against the first hijacker's back. "Stay down. Move, and you're done," he barked, voice sharp and controlled. The hijacker froze, his confidence shattered by the sudden turn of events. Passengers, initially paralyzed, began to awaken from the grip of fear. One by one, men and women found courage. The soldier near the back, eyes wide with adrenaline, lunged at the vest bearer. Another passenger, an off-duty firefighter, grabbed a tray and swung it at the knife wielder who struggled under Rex's teeth. Chaos had shifted in favor of those fighting for survival. Rex released the knife wielder only when Daniels gave the command. The man was immediately restrained with belts, scarves, and any available improvised handcuffs. Passengers worked together in coordinated desperation, tying arms and legs where plastic zip ties had failed. The cabin had become a battlefield, yet every move was directed by careful instinct and necessity. The vest-bearer's panic grew. He realized the balance of power had shifted. The detonator in his hand shook as he glanced at the now restrained companions. The fear in his eyes betrayed that he hadn't anticipated resistance so swiftly. Daniels seized the opportunity. "Step away from the detonator," he ordered, firearm aimed steadily. "Step away, or you will regret it." The man hesitated. Every second stretched, the weight of 1,000 lives pressing down on him. The passengers held their collective breath. Rex growled softly, muscles coiled, ready to act the instant the slightest move threatened anyone's life. Then, with a sudden lunge, Daniels advanced, kicking the man's arm away from the trigger. The detonator clattered to the floor, skidding beneath seats. The vest-bearer froze, hands raised, realizing he was powerless. The passengers surged forward instinctively, binding his arms quickly, while the soldier maintained a firm grip on the man's shoulders. The little girl's mother sobbed in relief, clutching her child to her chest. Other passengers gasped, some crying, some cheering in disbelief at what had just unfolded. It was chaos and relief, terror and courage, all colliding in a whirlwind of movement and emotion. Daniel's attention snapped back to Rex. The K-9, sensing the immediate threat eliminated, paused momentarily, ears twitching, scanning the cabin for residual danger. He had acted with precision, striking only when necessary, yet fully capable of overwhelming any human adversary. Daniels patted his neck, murmuring praise. "You did it, boy. Incredible work." Rex wagged his tail once, still alert, eyes following every subtle movement. Even in triumph, the dog understood the stakes were not yet entirely clear. The cabin was still full of frightened, disoriented passengers. One misstep could spark panic again, and the flight was far from over. Daniels moved methodically down the aisle, checking each restrained hijacker. The knife wielder groaned, the gunman stared in disbelief, and the vest-bearer trembled visibly. The dominance had shifted entirely, but Daniel's mind raced. Could he maintain control until the plane landed safely? Passengers were still recovering, some shaking with adrenaline, others trying to comfort children who had been terrified just moments before. A father held his son close, whispering assurances, while a businesswoman helped a mother tie the child's blanket tighter around her trembling little girl. Each act, however small, was a reclaiming of courage. a testament to human resilience even in the face of death. Daniels turned to the gunman. "Stay down," he commanded. "Don't even think about moving." The man nodded, his arrogance replaced by fear. He glanced at the K9, who had not left Daniel's side, and finally understood he was no longer in control. The vest-bearer finally sat down under the combined weight of passengers and soldiers. Every second that ticked by reinforced the reality. The hijacker's window of dominance had closed. The balance had shifted irreversibly. Daniels took a deep breath, surveying the cabin. There were no immediate threats, but he could not afford complacency. One loose weapon, one panicked passenger, one misjudged action, and catastrophe could still strike. He made a quick mental map. The cockpit, now secure, was their next priority. Rex would accompany him, the dog's presence both protection and deterrent. He whispered to Rex, low and calm, "Stay close, boy. We're almost there." The shepherd obeyed, muscles coiled like springs, eyes alert, ears forward. Every passenger seemed to sense the change too. The fear that had gripped them like chains was loosening, replaced by cautious optimism. They were survivors now, not just victims. The pilots had remained in the cockpit, shaken but alive, finally able to regain some semblance of control. Daniels motioned for them to follow safety protocols and adjust course as needed. Communication with air traffic control was restored, though fighters were already dispatched as a precautionary measure. Rex's nose twitched as he detected residual fear, sweat, and the metallic scent of adrenaline in the cabin. His body remained tense, ready to respond at the slightest hint of danger. Daniels relied on that instinct. Together, they were a unit, the perfect combination of human strategy and canine reflex. Passengers began whispering among themselves, some still in shock, some trying to process the rapid turn of events. One elderly woman patted Rex gently on the head, murmuring thanks. The little girl peeked over her mother's shoulder, wide-eyed, brushing her tiny fingers along the dog's fur. Daniels allowed a small, rare smile. "Good work," he said, voice quiet but firm. "You saved them all, but there was no time for celebration." The hijacking was far from over. While the immediate threat had been neutralized, they were still hundreds of miles from safety. The plane remained a vulnerable target. Every hijacker was restrained, but unpredictable. Every passenger still recovering from trauma. The next moves had to be deliberate. He began checking the hijackers systematically. The knife wielder groaned, clearly in pain, but alert enough to pose a potential threat if he loosened restraints. Daniels adjusted the binds subtly, ensuring maximum security without drawing attention to his meticulous control. The gunman, kneeling on the floor, stared at Rex with fear in his eyes. "That dog, he's unreal," he muttered, voice trembling. Daniels ignored him. Words were useless now. Action had spoken, and the lesson was clear. The passengers were no longer helpless, and any attempt to assert dominance would be met with decisive force. Even the vest-bearer, his hands bound, glanced nervously at Rex, realizing that the K9 had not just saved the little girl, but had changed the course of their plan entirely. The fear of the dog, combined with Daniel's authority, had tilted the balance irrevocably. The soldiers and passengers worked quickly, restraining each hijacker securely. Daniels directed them with calm authority, every instruction precise, ensuring no loose ends remained. Within minutes, the cabin was under control. The hijackers were neutralized, the passengers alive, though shaken. Rex, sensing the immediate danger had passed, relaxed slightly but remained alert, standing close to Daniels. The dog's amber eyes scanned the cabin once more, ready to act at the slightest hint of threat. Daniels exhaled, allowing himself a brief moment of relief. Flight 247 had survived its first and most dangerous trial. But the journey was not yet over. The plane was still in the air, still hundreds of miles from landing. and vigilance remained essential. For now, though, the passengers began to breathe again, some whispering prayers of gratitude, others clinging silently to loved ones. The heroism of one man and his canine partner had shifted the tide, showing that even in the darkest moments, courage and loyalty could prevail. The plane, once a vessel of fear, had become a testament to survival, unity, and the extraordinary bond between human and dog. The roar of Flight 247's engines filled the cabin, but it was no longer accompanied by the tense silence of fear. Instead, the hum of activity-controlled, deliberate echoed through the plane. Michael Daniels moved with precision, directing passengers and the soldiers who had finally shaken off the paralyzing grip of terror. Rex stayed at his side, every muscle coiled, eyes flicking between the restrained hijackers and the rows of still nervous passengers. Daniels' first priority was clear: secure the cockpit. The pilots were alive but shaken, their hands trembling as they clutched the controls. He motioned to the flight attendants and the soldier nearest the cockpit. "Keep the hijackers restrained. I'll go in with the dog. We need eyes on the controls and communication with a TC." The soldier nodded, stepping forward to supervise the subdued hijackers. The passengers, inspired by the swift action of Daniels and Rex, helped tighten bindings and ensured no weapons remained accessible. Courage spread through the cabin like wildfire. Once paralyzed civilians were now quietly taking charge. A coordinated force born from fear and necessity. Daniels approached the cockpit door with caution, Rex at his side. The dog's nose twitched, alert to the faintest trace of threat. Even though the hijackers were restrained, the air was thick with the tension of possibility. One wrong move, one unnoticed knife, could have catastrophic consequences. He knocked firmly on the cockpit door. "Captain, it's safe. You can open up." Inside, the pilots exchanged a glance, relief washing over their features. With careful hands, they unlocked the cockpit, allowing Daniels to enter, Rex following obediently. The flight deck was small, cramped, but Daniels' eyes immediately swept the controls, gauges, and instruments. Nothing had been damaged. The plane remained fully operational. "We're in control," Daniels said firmly. "You keep her steady, maintain altitude, and we'll handle the cabin." The captain exhaled, voice quivering slightly. "Thank God. We can finally—" His words faltered, emotion cutting through the tension. Daniels nodded. "We'll get everyone down safely. That's the priority." Meanwhile, Rex remained alert at the cockpit threshold, ears pricked, eyes scanning for any hint of movement from the hijackers in the cabin. The dog's presence alone reinforced the authority of Daniels' commands, ensuring even the subdued terrorists remained compliant. Back in the cabin, passengers were regaining composure. Mothers whispered reassurances to children, fathers adjusted blankets, and soldiers checked on those who had been injured or panicked during the chaos. The cabin, once a place of pure terror, had transformed into a controlled environment where survival was possible. Daniels returned to the main aisle, surveying the restrained hijackers. The gunman and knife wielder were secured tightly with makeshift restraints, while the vest-bearer sat with hands bound, shaking but unharmed. Each man's face reflected the realization that they had lost everything: their plan, their control, their dominance. The little girl, still clinging to her mother, peeked at Rex and whispered, "He's a hero." Daniels allowed a small smile. "Yes," he said softly. "He is." Rex gave a soft bark, almost in acknowledgement, as if understanding the gratitude directed toward him. The flight attendants moved efficiently now, coordinating with Daniels and the soldiers to maintain order. Supplies were distributed: water, blankets, and reassurance. Everyone knew the plane was still high above the ground, but the immediate threat had been neutralized. Daniels called out, addressing the passengers quietly but firmly. "Listen, everyone. We're safe now, but we have to stay calm. Help each other. Stay in your seats until we reach an airport where authorities can take over. Follow instructions, and no one will get hurt." A collective nod spread through the cabin. Passengers, still shaken but inspired by the earlier events, understood the importance of compliance now. Fear had been replaced by focus. The hijackers, subdued but still dangerous, were monitored closely. The soldier in the back kept a hand on the gunman's shoulder, while a passenger assisted in holding the knife wielder down. The vest bearer, his hands tied tightly, was immobilized, though his eyes darted nervously from Daniels to Rex. Daniels spoke calmly to the man with the vest. "You see what happens when people work together? No one was hurt because we acted quickly. If you cooperate now, this ends peacefully for you too." The man's face reflected a flicker of understanding, though terror and disbelief were still etched into his features. Rex, sensing the stability of the situation, finally relaxed slightly, lowering his body but remaining alert. The dog's presence had been instrumental in changing the dynamic. His instincts, speed, and precision had neutralized the immediate threat without unnecessary harm. Daniels turned to the passengers, emphasizing unity. "Stay calm. Help those around you. Keep an eye on one another. We're almost there." The plane's descent had begun. The pilots, now guided by Daniel's instructions, carefully reduced altitude, maintaining steady communication with air traffic control. Fighters were already dispatched to escort Flight 247 to the nearest airport capable of handling a hijacking emergency. The tension in the cabin remained, but it was different now, a mixture of cautious relief, adrenaline, and anticipation. Passengers whispered to each other, reassured by the knowledge that they were no longer entirely powerless. Daniels moved down the aisle one last time, checking that the hijackers were still secure and that passengers remained calm. Every row told a story. Mothers holding children, fathers offering quiet reassurances, soldiers maintaining vigilance, civilians finding courage and unity. The little girl whispered again, "Will we be okay?" Daniels knelt beside her, keeping his voice gentle. "Yes, you're going to be okay. You're brave, and you'll get home safely." Rex nudged her gently with his nose, a reminder of the protection he had provided. She smiled briefly, tears still on her cheeks, and hugged him in gratitude. As the plane continued its controlled descent, the final stretch of the ordeal had begun. The hijackers were no longer a looming threat. They were contained, subdued, and powerless. Daniel's meticulous actions, combined with Rex's training and instincts, had transformed fear into safety. The cabin, once paralyzed by panic, was now a testament to human courage and the extraordinary bond between man and dog. As Flight 247 approached the airport, Daniels coordinated with the pilots and crew, ensuring that every measure was taken for a safe landing. Passengers remained calm, eyes fixed on the floor or out the windows, clinging to hope and trust in those who had guided them through the nightmare. Rex stayed close to Daniels, alert, sensing the approaching resolution. The dog's vigilance remained, but the tension had shifted from immediate danger to controlled anticipation. The hijackers, aware that their plans had failed, sat silently, restrained, and defeated. The power they had sought had been stripped away, replaced by the authority and courage of those they had tried to terrorize. As the runway came into view, Daniels whispered to Rex, "Almost there, boy. Just a little longer." The passengers, sensing the landing, braced themselves, holding hands, closing eyes, and whispering prayers. The ordeal was nearly over, and the bonds forged in terror and courage were undeniable. Flight 247, once a vessel of fear and uncertainty, now carried the weight of survival, courage, and the triumph of human and canine teamwork. Flight 247 descended steadily, the city lights of the nearest airport glimmering beneath the night sky like distant stars. Inside the cabin, Passengers clutched one another, some holding children, some silently wiping tears from their eyes. The ordeal was nearly over, yet the adrenaline that had surged through their veins kept them alert, tense, and cautious. Michael Daniels remained at the center, surveying the restrained hijackers and the recovering passengers. Rex stayed at his side, alert, muscles coiled, yet his demeanor calmer than in the heat of the hijacking. The K-9's amber eyes flicked constantly, scanning the cabin, ensuring that no threat remained unnoticed. Daniels gave instructions quietly but firmly. Everyone stay seated. Keep your hands visible. Follow all crew instructions. We're almost on the ground. The flight attendants moved efficiently, reassuring passengers while making final checks. Mothers whispered to children, comforting them, while fathers offered quiet guidance, attempting to restore normalcy after the chaos. Soldiers remained vigilant, weapons trained but relaxed, ready for any last-minute threat. Outside, airport authorities were already mobilized. Emergency vehicles lined the runway, lights flashing, personnel ready to respond to any situation. Fighter jets had escorted the plane, though the hijacking was now under control. Yet caution remained paramount. The runway grew closer with each passing second. Daniels felt a mixture of relief and vigilance. The plane's journey, fraught with danger and heroism, was nearly complete. But the landing had to be executed perfectly. A misstep now could undo all the careful work, and no one could afford error. Rex shifted slightly, nudging Daniel's leg. The dog sensed the growing tension of the final moments, aware that, while the hijackers were subdued, safety was not yet guaranteed. The plane touched down with controlled precision, tires screeching slightly as they kissed the asphalt. The cabin erupted in cautious applause and murmurs of relief. Flight attendants instructed passengers to remain seated until the aircraft came to a full stop. The emergency vehicles flanked the plane, their sirens subdued but alert, ready to respond to any unexpected movement. Daniels approached the hijackers again, ensuring their restraints were tight and secure. The gunman and knife wielder sat silently, faces pale, realizing fully that their plan had failed. The vest bearer shook slightly, hands still bound, eyes darting between Daniels, Rex, and the authorities gathering on the tarmac. The cabin doors opened. A team of law enforcement officers and SWAT personnel quickly boarded, moving with practiced precision. Passengers began to stand, still shaken but safe, guided by authorities to disembark in an orderly fashion. Rex barked softly, alert as officers approached the restrained hijackers. The K-9's presence alone ensured compliance. The dog's body language was a clear warning. No sudden moves would be tolerated. Daniels finally allowed himself to breathe deeply. The plane had survived the ordeal intact, passengers were alive, and the hijackers were in custody. Yet he remained vigilant until every passenger had safely outside. The little girl from earlier clutched her mother's hand tightly, her wide eyes scanning the scene. She spotted Rex and ran forward, giggling between tears. Daniels knelt as she hugged the dog, whispering, "Thank you, thank you." Rex nudged her gently, tail wagging, a hero in the eyes of the innocent child. Daniels smiled, ruffling the dog's ears. "Good boy, Rex. You saved lives today." Passengers streamed onto the tarmac, many shaking hands with officers, soldiers, and flight attendants. Whispers of gratitude and admiration for Daniels, and Rex spread quickly. Every life saved was a testament to courage, teamwork, and split-second decision-making. The news crews had already arrived. Helicopters hovered overhead, broadcasting the miraculous resolution. Headlines would later read about Flight 247, the hijacking, and the K-9 that had leaped from his seat to save dozens of lives. The world would witness heroism firsthand. The bond between man and dog celebrated on every channel. Daniels coordinated with law enforcement, providing details about the hijackers' methods, movements, and plans. Officers nodded, taking notes, already planning how to prevent similar threats in the future. Every piece of information Daniels shared was crucial. His calm, precise observation during the hijacking had turned a potentially catastrophic event into a story of survival. Meanwhile, passengers were being escorted to waiting buses and ambulances. Medical personnel attended to anyone who needed treatment, minor injuries, or simply reassurance after the trauma endured. The little girl's mother approached Daniels. Tears streaked her face as she held her daughter close. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, voice breaking. You saved her life." Daniels knelt to meet her eyes. "It wasn't just me. Everyone here helped. But Rex, he was incredible. He saved the moment that could have been tragedy." The mother nodded, glancing down at the canine. Rex sat proudly, tongue lolling slightly, aware of the attention, but humble in his heroism. Photographers snapped pictures, capturing the bond between hero and dog, the relief of passengers, and the authority of Daniels as he maintained calm amidst the chaos. Soon, the story would dominate news cycles, inspiring all worldwide. Airport officials began transporting the hijackers to secure custody. Officers thanked Daniels and Rex personally, acknowledging their bravery and critical role in saving lives. Daniels remained humble. He didn't seek recognition. His mission had always been clear: protect, serve, survive. As the final passengers disembarked, Daniels took a moment to breathe. The plane was empty, the hijackers secured, the cabin silent. Rex remained at his side, ears perked, eyes scanning instinctively. The K-9 had done his job flawlessly, and Daniels allowed himself a rare smile of relief. "Good work, partner," Daniels murmured, scratching Rex behind the ears. "We did it. Everyone's safe." Rex barked softly in acknowledgement, tail wagging gently. Together, they had faced terror, made split-second decisions, and emerged victorious. Their teamwork had turned fear into courage, chaos into order, and potential tragedy into a story of survival. The passengers, now safely guided to medical and debriefing areas, waved and called out their thanks. Many would never forget the sight of a German shepherd leaping into action, nor the calm authority of the man who directed the fight against terror from a seat in the cabin. As news helicopters circled above, capturing footage of the aftermath, Daniels looked down at Rex. "You're a hero," he said softly. The dog nudged his hand, as if to say, "I only did my job." It was a rare moment of quiet in a day defined by chaos. For Daniels, the memory of fear, tension, and life-and-death decisions would linger. But so would the pride of seeing courage, loyalty, and teamwork triumph over terror. The plane had landed. The passengers were safe. The hijackers were in custody. And one extraordinary K-9 had leaped from his seat to change everything. The story of Flight 247 would be told for years. The bravery of passengers, the calm precision of a soldier, and the unbreakable bond between man and dog who saved dozens of lives at 30,000 feet. As Daniels walked off the tarmac, Rex at his side, lights flashing around them, cameras capturing every moment. He knew one thing with certainty. The bond between them had not only saved lives, it had defined heroism in its purest form. And for every passenger on Flight 247, that night would be remembered not as a story of fear, but as a story of courage, unity, and the extraordinary power of a man and his dog.